Kakadosh Boker Tov Masechet Yoma Daf Amud Aleph 481. We are starting with Amar le Rabbi Yochanan le Resh Lakish. Says Rabbi Yochanan to Resh Lakish, and he says as follows: Bishlema ledidi. Remember, there was a machloka between Rabbi Yochanan and Resh Lakish. He says like this: Rabbi Yochanan says to Resh Lakish, Bishlema ledidi. It's good according to me. Di alfina mi miluim, which means according to me that we learn from the miluim. Hainu detanya. That's what we learned in a Braita. Ze veze. Mazina lav kol shiva mikol chataot. That whether the Kohen Gadol, which is going to be doing his service on Yom Kippurim, or the Kohen that he is burning the para aduma, mazin alav kol shiva, they're going to be sprinkling on him every single day of the 7 days. Mikol chataot, from all the parot adumot, right, that were done from Moshe Rabbeinu until that time. Shayu sham, that they were there in the Bet HaMikdash as a mishmeret. So according to me, it makes sense to have inami hazah b'miluim, that there was also hazah, the sprinkling, during the 7 days of the miluim. Ela ledidach ti'alaft misinai, but according to you, that you learn it from Har Sinai, hazah b'sinai me'avai, was there sprinkling on Har Sinai? Meaning, where do we learn such a thing, a concept of hazah for the 7 days? Remember, we already brought down at the beginning of the Yomah, 7 days before Kippur, they used to separate the Kohen Gadol, right? And they used to put him in a certain lishkat padredin. Then 7 days before the Kohen, a regular Kohen, would come and burn the paraduma, they would also separate him. Where do you learn it from? So says Rabbi Yochanan, if you learn it from the Miluim, it makes sense that you're going to be sprinkling the Kohen Gadol every single day of the 7 days. And they used to sprinkle him from the paraduma, from the ashes of the paraduma, from the beginning of time, from the beginning of Moshe Rabbeinu until then. Because they always used to have, the remnants of what it was, and they used to sprinkle from then. But if you're going to tell me that you're learning from Har Sinai, there was no paraduma, there was no sprinkling of the paraduma. So what's going on? So he comes and he says, Amalei, Resh Lakish answers to Rabbi Yochanan, Utamech minicha, but according to you, it is good. B'miluim, right, was dam. Hacha mayim. By the miluim, the aza'ah was done with blood. Here, during the 7 days of separation, the aza'ah was done with the water of the chatat. So it's not, you can't really compare it 100%. You're right, there was such a concept of sprinkling and sprinkling 7 days, but it wasn't 100% the exact same, right? You're comparing apples to oranges. One was with blood and one was with wine. Here it says in the footnote, as it says, "Vayikach Moshe mishem mishchal min adama shel hamizbeach vayaz ala Haron." So then he took from the blood which was on the mizbeach and then he sprinkled it on Aaron. Okay, so therefore you see from here that it was done with blood. It wasn't done with water. Here it's done with water. Okay. So halakashia, but it's not a question. Why? The Tani Rabbi Chia, because teaches Rabbi Chia in a Braita, nichnesu mayim tachat dam, that the water was instead of the blood, right? And therefore, according to him, he says no, it's the exact same thing, but just as a substitute. The substitute at the beginning they did it with blood, and now they're doing it with water, but it's the same concept. It's hazah for 7 days. You're sprinkling for 7 days. Ela ledidcha, but according to you, Resh Lakish, hazah b'sinai mi'avai. There was no hazah at all on Sinai. Meaning at least here there was hazah. With what? Blood. Okay, fine. But then we have a substitute. We're going to do it with water instead of blood. But here there's nothing. So answers Resh Lakish, Amaleh ma'ala be'alma. He says, no, it was stama ma'ala. What does that mean? Remember, ma'ala just means it's not an obligation, but it was a good thing to do. It's a ma'ala. It's a good thing. Okay? So Tanya Kavated Rabbi Yochanan, Tanya Kavated Resh Lakish. We have a Braita in accordance to the Shita of Rabbi Yochanan, right? That they learn it, the Chiyuv from the Miluim, from the inauguration of the Mishkan. And we have a Braita in accordance to Resh Lakish, and we learn it from Sinai. Tanya Kavated Rabbi Yochanan, the Braita that goes according to Rabbi Yochanan, it says, Vezot yavo Aaron al Kodesh. With this, Aaron is going to come to the Kodesh HaKodashim on Kippur. Binyan, what are we talking about in this situation? What is it? Binyan de Miluim. We are talking about the miluim. What is actually brought down to do with the miluim? Aaron piresh shiv'a v'shimesh yom echad. Aaron had to separate for 7 days, and then he was doing the services for 1 day, by Yom HaShmini. That was last week's parasha, by Yom HaShmini. Moshe masar lo kol shiva. Now Moshe Rabbeinu gave him all the 7 days kedei lechancho ba'avodah, in order to do chinuch. Meaning that even though the service was supposed to be for 1 day, he gave him 7 days in order to do a chinuch in the avodah. Ve'af ledorot, so too for generations. Kohen Gadol poresh shiva u'meshamesh yom echad. He's going to separate for 7 days before Yom Kippur, and then he's going to serve 1 day for Kippur. Ushne Tamidei Chachamim mitamidav shel Moshe. Now, 2 Tamidei Chachamim from the students of Moshe Rabbeinu. What does that mean, students of Moshe Rabbeinu? You're not going to find students of Moshe Rabbeinu nowadays, right? Unless the guy was living for a few thousands of years. You understand? He doesn't. He says no. La'puke tzedokim. This goes against the tzedokim that they argue on the entire concept, whether of the seder of the Ktoret and the Kippur and all those things. Mosrin lo kol sheva kedei lechancho b'avodah. So they come and they make sure that they're doing the service for the 7 days. Mikan amru, from here we say. Shivat yamin kodim mekablim mafrishim kohen gadol lishkat paradin. That's why they come and they separate him to the lishkat paradin. Uchshem shemafrishim kohen gadol, just like they're going to separate the kohen gadol by Yom Kippur. Kap mafrishim kohen soref et parah lishkat shapnei apira betzavon mizacha. So too they're going to separate the kohen which is burning the paraduma to the lishka which is in the bira, which is on the northeast. Ve'achar zeh, and after the kohen gadol which is going to be serving on the Yom Kippur. Or the one which is basically the kohen which is burning the paraduma. They're going to come and they're going to burn, right? They're going to sprinkle, from the paraduma that was always there from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu. So this is mefurash like Rabbi Yochanan. V'im tomad, now you're going to ask during the miluim it was with dam. And here it's with water. Amarta, he says, it's a substitute. The water came in place of blood. And it says in Pasuk, which is the paraduma. So this right is exactly like Shitat Rabbi Yochanan. Make sense? Yeah, clear. Very good. Clear for everyone there? Okay. So says the Gemara, V'hai bezot, ya mibaile legufe. He says, 1 second, but I thought, right, that this bezot, right, the word bezot is not extra because you actually need it for the same concept of the word bezot is not coming to teach you that you're going to come, right? That's what he's coming and saying. He's saying it's not extra. You have to read it for bezot yavo aron. What does it mean bezot yavo aron? Befar ben bakar, right? Lechata ve'elola. How do we know that the word bezot is talking about that you're going to separate for 7 days? So Amri, they said, Ile korban lechudei. If it was only just to teach you about the korban, the pasuk could have said bezeh or be'elle with the parva ail, because it's talking about 2 different animals. My bezot. What does it mean bezot, which is in female? So it says shema mina tarte. We're going to learn 2 different things. What are the 2 different things, right, that we're going to learn? So he comes and he says, right? He comes and he says as follows, right? He comes and he says like this. It says, Shema mina tarte. It's going to come to teach you 2 different things. What is it coming to teach you, right? The 2 different things that we're going to teach you is to do with the continuation of the pasuk and also the separation of the 7 days. Okay, and therefore the separation is going to be lashon nekeva, is going to be, right, female. Okay. My ve'omer. What does it mean ve'omer? Ve'omer means here, right? Why does it have to say ve'omer and it says? What do you mean ve'omer? Right? Why do I need that? Ve'omer kasher asa b'yom hazeh tzivah shelo lechaper. What is ve'omer? So he says like this, right? V'chi teiman. If you're going to tell me Yom Kippurim kama u'devai pirsha kedei ashkecham b'miluim, aval b'Yom Kippurim de'alma lo. Maybe the only time that you needed separation was the first Yom Kippur, right? Why? Just like miluim. Meaning, miluim, there was only one inauguration. So therefore, just like by the inauguration, it was a one-off. It wasn't for generations. So to the Kippur was the first one, right? But then the rest of the Kippurs, no. Inami, or you could also say, Kohen Gadol, Kohen Gadol kama, hu debay prisha, aval Kohen Gadol be'alma lo. Maybe only the first Kohen Gadol, which is Aaron Kohen, needs to do prisha. But any other Kohen Gadol doesn't need to do prisha. Tashma comes to teach you kasher asa. That's the ve'omer. The ve'omer teaches you kasher asa, just like they did originally, so too they're going to be doing every other time as well. Okay, make sense? Okay, perfect. Tanya Kavate de Resh Lakish. They taught in accordance to Resh Lakish now. Where's the Braita which says in accordance to Resh Lakish? It says in the Braita, Moshe ala be'anan, v'nitkasa be'anan. Moshe Rabbeinu, he went up in the clouds, and he was covered in the clouds. V'nitkadesh be'anan, he sanctified himself in the anan. Kedei lekabel et Torah l'Yisrael kedusha, in order to receive the Torah for Yisrael, which are the lechot, right, with kedusha. Shneimar, but it says in the pasuk, Vayishkon kvod Hashem al Har Sinai. right? That right now he went and he was by Har Sinai. This was the story which was after the Aseret Dibrot, the 10 Commandments. Which is at the beginning for 40 days. Okay? So it says over here, these are the words of Rabbi Yosef Galilei. Rabbi Akiva Omer, Rabbi Akiva says, Vayishkon Kvod Hashem Rosh Chodesh, from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is before Matan Torah, which means the 6 days was from Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and it wasn't after Matan Torah. So it comes out here, there's a machloket, was these 6 days? Remember, there were 6 days, it wasn't 7 days. We said that you needed the 7 days just in case, right? A person would live with a nida, and then it would be a problem. Okay, so now here though, the question is, when it says Vayishkon Kvod Hashem, is that Rosh Chodesh? Do we say is it from Rosh Chodesh Sivan until Shavuot, or do we say it's after Shavuot, the 6 days? Okay, we're now on Daled Amud Bet. Okay, so it says here, Vaychaseu Anan Lehar. What does it mean here? We're going to cover, right, in the tree, right, in the clouds, right on the mountain. Vayikra el Moshe, they're going to call Moshe on the 7th day. It says, Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim v'lo ba'katuv ella lachlok kavod Moshe. Everyone was already there to already receive the Torah, the 10 Commandments. But it was to give kavod to Moshe Rabbeinu. Rabbi Natan says, Lo ba'katuv ella lamarek achila u'shtiya shebeme'av l'shumo k'malachei asherot. The sumo, right? It basically was in order to cleanse him, right, from eating and drinking in his, and everything in his stomach, in order to make him, right, like the malachei asharet. So that's why he says that he needed the prisha in order to be much like, to become like a malach, right? And therefore he had to cleanse himself. So finally, by the time he came there, he was without any, right, food, drink, anything. So he was like a malach. By the way, you should know in this week's bulletin, you could look at it. It's something beautiful, incredible. How are the 10 Commandments, the entire Torah, included in the 10 Commandments? So understand, there was a very important inyan that they used to read the 10 Commandments in the mornings, and then some people took it off because of the heretics, and they said that the 10 Commandments is entire Torah. But how do you have the entire Torah encompassed inside the 10 Commandments? 10 Commandments are 10. How do you have the entire Torah understand? So look in this week's bulletin in the Daf Yomi. Beautiful, something incredible. Okay? So says the Gemara, Rav Matya ben Charash Omer, Rav Matya ben Charash comes and he says, Lo ba'akatuv ela le'ayem alav. The Torah was only coming in order to be ma'ayem, which means to separate the people in order that they should be fearful. In order that the Torah is going to be given with fear. Because you have to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu with fear, which means, many times people, they forget. Some people say, no, you can't do with fear, right? Everything has to be done with love and all these, fabrigans and drinking, but it has to be also with fear, right? It says in a pasuk, if do it Hashem bi'ira vegilu birada. Gilu is simcha, by the way. Remember, gilu means happiness, but gila is happiness, but it still has to be with a certain fear, right? Why? Because at the end of the day, it cannot be with lightheadedness, right? The Torah is not acquired with lightheadedness. Okay, so says the Gemara, "Mai vegilu birada." The place of the simcha, which is the matan Torah, because it's like the Torah makes a person happy, but there itself also has to be done with fear. Meaning you cannot have one without the other. You need both, right? You cannot only have fear, right? But you cannot only have love. You understand? Like joy. You need both, right? That's why Judaism, they're very, very much, it always has to be both together, right? Not extreme in one, extreme in always middle path. Has to be combining both together. So so what exactly is the machloket, right? The machloket is, so says the Gemara, what is the machloket between them? Rabbi Yosef Galilei and Rabbi Kiva. What's the machloket between Rabbi Yosef Galilei and Rabbi Kiva? Beplukta da'ani tanai. So the same machloket of another tanaim. Tanya was learned to the Braita. Beshisha b'chodesh nitna Torah liYisrael. On the 6th of the month, the Torah was given to Bnei Yisrael. Rabbi Yosef Omer, Rabbi Yosef says, Beshivabo, on the 7th of Sivan. Mandamar Beshisha, the Mandamar that says it's on the 6th of Sivan. Beshisha nitna v'shiva Allah. On the 6th of Sivan, it was given, and on the 7th, it went up. Mandamar Beshiva, on the Mandamar that it was on the 7th, Beshiva nitna, it was given on the 7th, v'shiva, and he came and went up on the same 7th day. That he called them on the 7th day. Rabbi Yosef savar Tanakama. So Rabbi Yosef holds like Tanakama that he says on the 6th of the Torah was the month the Torah was given, right? And therefore, so this was after the 10 Commandments. In order to receive the rest of the Torah. But if you're going to tell me now Yishkon Kvod Hashem was from Rosh Chodesh, and then he went up to the mountain, and then he was called on the 7th day, he already accepted on the 6th day. Right? And the Anan, the cloud already went out also after the 6th day. Rabbi Kiva Savarla, but Rabbi Kiva holds like Rabbi Yosef, that on the 7th it was given to Bnei Yisrael. And therefore, according to him, it was the first 6 days was before Shavuot. So Bisham and Rabbi Kiva, it's good according to Rabbi Kiva. I know the Mishkachla. That's when we find Mishiva Sabbath Tamuz Nishaber Luchot. That the 17th of Tammuz, the Luchot were broken. Why? From the 7th of Sivan, right? The Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the mountain. Yesh 24 Sivan. There's 24 days of Sivan. V'shitzar de Tammuz, 16 days of Tammuz. Melura means so that's 14 days. So he came down on the 17th of Tammuz. And then he broke the Luchot. But according to Rabbi Yosef that he said that on 6 days it was separation. And then you have the 40 days. So it wasn't broken until the Kav Gimel Tammuz. Right? Why was it until the Kav Gimel Tammuz? Because they didn't start counting until the 13th of Sivan. Because if you're going to do, right, if you're going to do basically that on the 7th, basically, how did it go? How did it work? Like, it doesn't make sense. Because what's going to happen is that it's only going to happen afterwards the 40 days. So if it's going to be 40 days only afterwards, instead of the, immediately, so then you have a problem. So Amar Lecha Rav Yosef Le Arba'in Dehar Ba'adi Shisha de Prisha says no. The 40 days of the mountain were including the 6, meaning the 6th of the Prisha were already included in it. So therefore, you're actually starting from Zayin of Sivan. So therefore, it does make sense that it's still going to be the 17th of Tammuz, and that's when he broke the Luchot. Okay, so Amar Mor says, Vayikra el Moshe. So he called to Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim. They're all there. So he said it was to give him kavod. So Misael el Rabbi Lazar, there's a proof to Rabbi Lazar. The man Rabbi Lazar says Rabbi Lazar. Vayikra el Moshe, that he called to Moshe v'chol Yisrael omdim. V'lo ba'ketuv v'lo lochlok kavod. He's giving him kavod. So Meitvei, we're going to ask a question. When it says kol lo v'yishma et kol ha'medaber elav, he heard the voice. What is a kol now? Kol elav. So he says, no, Moshe shama v'chol Yisrael lo shamu. Only Moshe was hearing, and not everyone else. Meaning Moshe was the only one that was listening to the voice. He was able to hear it. Yeah, but it was selective. But it wasn't selective because I decided it. It was selective because Hashem decided. Yeah, but it's true. It's a concept of selective hearing that you can only hear certain things. But here, usually selective hearing is what I decide, right? Subconsciously. Here, no, it's what they're deciding, right? So says the Gemara, it's not a question. Says a Braita, right? When they were listening and everything, the drasha was that only Moshe was listening. That was in Ol Moed. Okay. Another answer. Okay. That means in Ol Moed was only heard, right, to Moshe Rabbeinu and not to Bnei Yisrael. But by Har Sinai, it was everybody. By Tema, for you could answer, no. Lakashya. Habe kriya ve'habe dibur. Which means that which we said that Bnei Yisrael were also able to hear the kriya, that was when he called them. But once it became the dibur between them, no. Meaning I could hear somebody calling you, but then I don't hear the rest of the conversation. So that was the second answer. The kriya, they all heard, but the dibur, they didn't hear. So Rabbi Zreka, he actually once asked a contradiction in front of Rabbi Lazar. It was Rabbi Lazar that asked the contradiction. He wasn't able to go to the Oel Moed because of the cloud. That he came inside of the cloud. It says that he grabbed him and he pulled him in. It looks like like those they always do all these cartoons or whatever, that they grab him and they bring him in. That's what he did. Who grabbed him and brought him in right into the cloud. So he says, the Rabbi Ishmael Tana, the Academy of Rabbi Ishmael taught, it's also written betoch. What does that mean? By Kriyat Yamsuf, it says, betoch hayam. Malehalan shevil, just like over there, it was like a path inside of the water. So to here, it's a path inside of the Anan, which means Mamash, it became like a tunnel. Like all of a sudden, in the middle of the cloud, there was a split, and he was able just to walk through the Anan, to walk through the cloud. Right? Vayikra el Moshe v'daber. right? So he called to Moshe and he spoke. Lama ikdim kriya ledibur. Why does it say he spoke first and then meaning like he called him and then he spoke to him? Limdat Torah derech eretz. So important. The Torah always wants to teach us derech eretz. What's a derech eretz? Shelo yomar adam davar lechavero elam ken koreo. Call them and then speak to them. How many times does it happen? You go to someone and you don't call their name and you start speaking to them, and they didn't realize you're speaking to them. Say, I didn't realize they were speaking to me. Right? Why? You're just coming, you're speaking, but who are you speaking to? You understand? If I call your name, now you know I'm speaking to you. I'm addressing you. Once I address you, now you know what's going on. You understand? Very important. So but that's called derech eretz. Okay, the Torah is teaching us derech eretz. First you have the kriya, and then you have the dibur. You don't just start speaking. First you have the kriya. Okay? This also is a proof to Rabbi Chanina. Don't say anything to your friend until you actually call him. Okay? Another from the same pasuk, another drasha. Lemor. What does it mean? Vaydaber Hashem mol moed. Lemor, saying. Amar Rabbi Musia bar bered de Rabbi Musia. Says Rabbi Musia, the son of Rabbi Musia. Yeah? In the name of Rabbi Musia Rabbah. This sounds very interesting. They were all Musias. Or Menasia. I don't know. Very interesting. It sounds like Rabbi Musia, but it's the grandson of Rabbi Musia in the name of Rabbi Musia Agadol. So it's probably like a grandson to the grandfather to the great grandfather, right? But that actually is a proof to the right. You know, our minhag that we always, you know, it's usually the grandfather, grandson. You know, so it says here, how do we know that right now if you're going to say something to your friend that you shouldn't? It's a suit to say it to somebody else. Meaning, imagine right now, I come and I tell John Jack a secret, right? How do we know that John Jack cannot come and tell me Chai, right? That which I just told him. So he says, because I didn't say lechemor. Meaning, I don't have to tell him, by the way, it's a secret. I don't have to say that. Even without saying that, it's automatically that. Until I tell John Jack, no, you can tell people. I don't mind. If I don't tell it to him, he's not allowed to tell people. How do we know that? It says, Shneimar vaydaber Hashem elav mol moed lemor. The word lemor is giving you, right? It's kilu, it's saying la emor, which is al tomar. Don't say it. Which means that if I don't give you the permission to say it, you're not allowed to say it. Capish? Michlal de tarvayu svirale. So from here we both hold. Miluim kol hakatuv b'me'akeven. So it's mashma. That from everything that we just said, whether it's Rabbi Yochanan or Resh Lakish, that they learn from the Kohen Gadol, whether it's from Har Sinai or the Miluim, it's mashma that it impedes even b'diavad. Teitmar, because it was stated, Miluim, Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Chanina, Chalamar kol hakatuv b'me'akeven, Chalamar kol hakatuv ledorot me'akeven, Shemekav ledorot me'akeven. He says no. Basically, to do with the Miluim, the inauguration, everything which was written there, it impedes. Right, but as we said, by the Miluim, one of them, Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Chanina, one of them says everything which is written is impedes, and the other one says that anything which is me'akev ledorot for all the generations, which is, for example, all the korbanot and everything, it doesn't impede. But if it wasn't impeding then, right, so for generations, so it's not going to impede. So tistayim, so we want to bring a proof that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that says kol hakatuv me'akev ben. It says Rabbi Shimon Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, Ima miluim kol hakatuv me'akev. And if you're going to tell me by the miluim that everything which was written is me'akev, and it's not going to actually answer anything, tistayim. So that's what we're actually going to say, that it was actually Rabbi Yochanan. My benayu, what's a halachic difference between them? The difference between them. So he says over here, Amar Rav Yosef, He Amud Aleph says Rav Yosef, semicha yikemenau. The difference between them is semicha, when you lean on the animal. Right? Remember, there's a concept of semicha. Before doing shchita, you have to lean on the animal. That's the difference between them. That anything which is written by the miluim, it's going to be impeding. Semicha is also me'akev. Semicha, leaning on the animal, also impedes. Okay, because it's also even b'diavad. But according to the version of semicha lo me'akev, but it was only me'akev by the miluim, but not for generations. So according to that, if a person did not do semicha later on, it does not impede. And we continue Bezrat Hashem tomorrow.